Welcome back, amazing business owners, entrepreneurs, creative people. I'm so glad you're here today. Today's episode was recorded earlier in 2020, before the pandemic hit, before basically the whole world changed. And then chaos happened, podcast processes changed, and a ton of changes happened in a short amount of time, which is why this episode and a few others haven't been published until now. This episode is so freaking special to me because it is an interview with an amazing man. Yes, a man who is one of those rare people that is actually engaged when you're having a conversation with him. I remember talking with him in California last year, and we were able to just connect on a level that most conversations don't really happen on anymore. We are all so distracted with things competing for our attention over and over again. And it can be so impactful to really connect with someone when you talk to them instead of constantly thinking about something else. Nick Demos is a Tony Award-winning Broadway producer who has spent his life telling stories in different formats, from the stage to now in his own life and business. And today's episode is all about the stories that you can share in your marketing that will have a huge impact on your business. So many of my students share that they don't think that they're very interesting and don't have any stories to share, but I want to assure you that there are so many things that your clients want to know. Nick and I will outline some suggestions and ideas today, and you might hear a few amens in the mix because of some truth bombs. This episode was recorded in early 2020, so you will hear some references to the Super Bowl, and yes, things have changed a lot, but the need to share more of yourself and your story with your audience has not changed. It is still crazy relevant, and I am excited to share this episode with you. Because of the delay in publishing the episode, I wanted to make sure to share Nick's current workshop that's available. It's called Align Your Niche, because if you don't know who you serve and who you want to attract, how the heck can you decide on any of your marketing? That is so crazy overwhelming to even think about. I am so aligned with that message and have felt it in both of my businesses. To find out more about Align Your Niche with Nick Demos, check out the show notes at www.businessstraightUp.com/045 for more details, and the link will be there. Ready to learn more about storytelling and how you're not as boring as you think you are? Let's go. Hey there, awesome people. I am Brooke Summer, and you are listening to Business Straight Up, the podcast for creative entrepreneurs to learn, connect, grow, and build the business and life that they dream of. Welcome, let's get going and dive right in. Hello, amazing business owners. I am so excited for today's guest. Now, you all know that most of my guests on this podcast are female, and that's not because I don't love the guys, because I do, but there's just so many men in the business space that I really want to hear the ladies too. So, you know, when I have a guy on the podcast that he's going to be freaking awesome, and that is the truth. It is very rare, I'm just saying. So, today's guest has actually won a Tony. How amazing is that? And I am getting way ahead of myself, so I want to welcome Nick Demos, a kick-ass business owner and entrepreneur that works with other heart-centered entrepreneurs to own their place in their market by sharing their stories. Thank you so much for being here today, Nick.
First of all, I am so honored to be here based on what I just heard in that intro that you rarely allow the gentleman on. I am so honored that you have chosen me to be one of the gentlemen that speaks to your crew here. So thank you so much for having me.
You are the second guy that I've ever had. Yes. So it is very rare, and I'm so excited to have you. I know that you and I have had the awesome opportunity to meet a few times at Business by Design Live in California. So I know a little bit about your background, but for the listeners that want to know more, tell me more about you. What's your story? What has your journey looked like? And what has brought you to where you're at in your life and your business right now?
So I'll give you the long version. How's that?
Sure, sounds good.
So backing up, I've always been a creative entrepreneur. I started very, very young as a theater artist. Obviously, you announced that I have a Tony Award, and that's sort of a middle point in the story. But I was a dancer and an actor professionally from the age of 16. By 19 years old, I had performed in a Broadway national tour and moved to New York. I was an actor and a dancer, singer until I was in my mid-20s. And I had this moment. I was dancing on the Radio City Music Hall stage with the Rockettes.
Oh my gosh.
Kicking my head. And I had this moment where I realized that wasn't what I wanted to do with my life.
Wow.
That here I was at this, very successful, seemingly great experience. And I was having lovely experiences, but I realized that I wanted more. I wanted something different. And so then I started choreographing and directing, which led to producing. And I'm now 28 years old, and I am directing a musical at a theater, and they fire the producer of the theater, the board of directors. It was a not-for-profit theater company.
Just randomly?
Well, some things had been building up apparently behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And I happened to be there directing the show, and they turned to me, and I directed there the previous 3 years. They turned to me and they said, would you consider taking over the theater for a year while we do a national search?
Wow.
I had no idea how to run a business other than my own, right? My own, when you are a actor, you're running your own business, right?
Yes.
But that's very different than running a company. So I said, heck yes. I absolutely knew that I wanted to have that experience. So I took over the company for a year. And in that year, it was a beautiful, successful year. The board president came back to me and said, we don't want to continue our search. We want you to take over the theater.
Wow.
I ran the theater for another 9 years, tripling its operating budget, adding a children's academy and new offices, and did a capital campaign that raised funds for a brand new theater and opened a new theater. So I more than tripled the size of the theater in my time there. And it was valuable, incredible business experience. Then I knew it was time to leave. And,
how did you know?
Well, you know what? I was practicing yoga.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to a teacher training program in New York. I took a month off of my job and I was in a meditation. And in the meditation, I realized I had this, the spark, you get those sparks of intuition.
Yes.
I knew that I had to not take a month off. I needed to quit my job.
Wow.
And I knew that I need to make a change.
That's big.
And it took a little while. It wasn't like, okay, I'm going to quit my job tomorrow. It was a process. It took about a year. And during that last year, I formed a production company of my own, moved to New York full time and started producing on Broadway. And 2 years later, was very fortunate to produce a show that won the Tony Award.
That's amazing.
Which, was 40 years in the making for me, ultimately. I was nearly 40 years old. And I'd been in the theater my entire life, basically. And the interesting thing about that experience was I realized in that moment, in the Tony moment, it was like, okay, now what? Do I continue to go after the next elusive Tony? Like, what is next for me? What do I want to do next?
Right. And can I just sorry, I feel like I keep interrupting your story.
No, please do.
I feel like as business owners, we always think that there's like this finish line, right? Like once I get this, then I'll have made it. And it sounds like for you, that was the Tony, which is the theater award, like the highest of high. And then you get to that point and you're like, well, now what? And we always believe that we're going to get to this finish line and be done. And it never really works like that.
That is the truth. And so really it was like, what's my next chapter going to be? What do I want now?
Mm-hmm.
And it's an unfolding I've come to realize. I realized that I wanted to dive deeper into my creative self and as an entrepreneur. I wanted to explore new avenues. And I began teaching creativity retreats and storytelling. And then I stumbled upon Mr. James Wedmore, our mutual friend.
Yes.
And where I met you, actually. And you will always hold this incredibly dear space in my heart. Because that very first day, I didn't have a business yet, an online business I'm talking about. I didn't have an online business yet. I didn't know what I was doing. I, by happenstance, sat at this table. I came to this event of how many hundred people, a couple hundred people,
yeah,
all by myself. I didn't know a single person in the room. I sat down at a table and you were across the table from me.
Oh
And
my gosh.
yeah. And when we went, we had to go around the table and say who we are, what we do, who we serve. I had no idea what to say because I didn't have a business yet. I just had this background and this history. And I knew that I wanted to work with people online in the way that I've been working offline. I just didn't know what that would look like. And I spoke for the first time in that world, in that space. And you were the person that I was looking at when I told that story to. So you were forever a part of my journey. And I so thank you because you were so welcoming and so sweet and kind.
Oh, thank you so much. It's so funny. You never know how you're going to affect someone else just by listening, right? And just by talking to someone.
So very, very true. So I really do appreciate you. And that, then fast forward, like the story wasn't long enough. Fast forward to now, here I am a little while later. And I have had the great fortune to teach and work with creative entrepreneurs and soul-centered entrepreneurs, I like to say, working with them to tap into their intuition and their creativity and to tell their stories.
I absolutely love that. And it's so funny because I have questions for you about spirituality and stuff, but I feel like intuition is something that we all have and we so often ignore it.
Yeah. And for me, let me say this about spirituality. For me, spirituality is the process of self-actualization. It is coming into the wholeness and the totality of who you are. And a big part of that is listening to that intuition, listening to that little voice that's deep within you that knows the answers. What happens is that we are clouded by what we've been told about who we are, who we're supposed to be. And when you come into this world, you're creation, you're created, you're pure, right? But over time, as we're growing, the maturation process, we are told so much of who we are supposed to be that we no longer can listen to that pure voice deep within us. So your job, and what I think of as spirituality, is learning to listen to that quiet voice and taking away the layers upon layers upon layers of what you've been told you're supposed to be and coming to your truth of who you actually are.
Yes, that is so powerful. It reminds me of a quote in one of the books that we just read, something along the lines of, we want our children to learn that they can be anything they want to be except for themselves. And that is really, really hard to think of when we're a parent and we're trying to teach them to do certain things. And maybe that's not them. And that's okay too. And we have learned so many stories that don't necessarily serve us on a higher level.
Yeah, I think that no parent, every parent wants I shouldn't say no parent. That's terrible grammar, Nick. Every parent wants the best for their child, right? I don't think parents set out to intentionally, tell you, my parents didn't say to me, Nick, you need to forget this theater thing and be a lawyer. They didn't say it because they didn't love me or didn't want me to experience or express my creativity. They were concerned for my well-being.
Yes, definitely.
Right. But that story that they told me about being that I should be a lawyer had created all kinds of money stories for me, because in their mind, I couldn't make a living. I couldn't make money as a theater artist. And it took me years and years and years to unpack that story. Even though I was making money, I still had that story within me.
Yes. And how often do we just repeat the stories that our parents gave us? Unintentionally, we're just teaching them. So chances are they may have been taught previously that art is not a way to make money.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting because they've actually found science now that we genetically carry stories and pass them down, literally through our cells, through our DNA.
Wow.
Yeah. So the old patterning that when you break it, you are breaking the cycle of years and years and years and years of passed on, which is phenomenal when you think about it.
That's crazy phenomenal. Powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. So I always think of, again, going to what is spirituality. Part of it is breaking those patterns. Part of it is the evolution is not only of you, but of the generations that will happen after you.
Yes. And what do you really want that legacy to be? Even if it's not like your children biologically, the
Mm-hmm.
kids that you're around and the people that you are affecting around you, what do you want that legacy to be?
Totally. It's like you were saying, you have no idea how you're going to affect somebody. But when
Yeah.
you move it energetically out of your field, so to speak, then you're not going to pass it on.
Wow. That's really powerful and something to think about for sure. I want to ask you about stories. Like,
Sure.
let's talk about stories because we've been talking about the stories that we learn when we're young. So we're
Hmm.
going to kind of talk about a different kind of story now. And storytelling is something that so many of us struggle with. We think that we're not interesting and that we lead a very boring life. And I tell so many of my students that you have a story in you that someone needs to hear. And you don't know what that is, maybe just yet, but figuring that out is crazy important. So, why is storytelling important for a personal brand and in business?
It's vital, and I'll tell you why. So we have been telling stories since time began. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
actually even knows when the first story truly occurred. We sat around the fire and told stories, and they were instinctual stories of survival.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that, speaking of DNA, it's that far back in our system. And the way in which our brain processes is that it processes through storytelling. You spend more of your day telling a story than anything else.
Well, and really, when you think about like that's how history was written, right?
Correct. Absolutely. And,
Wow.
and we passed on these stories verbally for years and years and years and years before they were written. And now we have so many ways to tell stories, which is this explosion of storytelling now. It's
Mm-hmm.
never been a better time to be a storyteller. And if you are a personal brand, you are a storyteller, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people also remember stories better than they remember facts, right?
Yes.
And they buy story more than they buy fact. So consequently, the use of it is vital to the success of your business, of creating especially personal brand stories. And I would say for any brand really, but as a personal brand, people buy from you. Yes, they're buying what your offer is. You have to have an incredible offer, right? You have to have your
Mm-hmm.
irresistible offer. But there's going to be 3 people potentially, or 10 people, or 100 people, or 5,000 people that have a similar offer to you. The only thing that differentiates you is you.
Yes.
So
And I agree wholeheartedly on a personal brand, but did you watch the Super Bowl yesterday?
I didn't.
So there was a Google commercial. Now Google is a huge, huge business that like all of us were crying at the end of this commercial because they used a story in sharing how someone uses their product to remember things about his wife that has passed on. So powerful. And
Yeah,
really, I mean, they could have just said, hey, buy Google Assistant or whatever it was.
right.
But instead, they used a story to show that. And they're a huge company.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why I said it's really all brand, right?
Yes.
Like, look at typically it's aspirational in some way, right? We always talk about transformation, right? About showing the transformation of what your product can do. And you make not you the hero, the person who is buying your product is your hero in the story,
Yes.
right? It's not about you, boo. It's not about you. It's about who's buying your product. They are your hero. So make the story about them and make it transformational. Take them from A to Z, right? And in between is the conflict, right? In between. In every good storytelling, there's act 1, act 2, act 3. Act 1 is the setup, act 2 is the conflict, and act 3 is the resolution. Your hero, you need to set up that your hero is going to take a journey and your product, your whatever it is that you offer is their solution, is going to help them. And it's going to take them to this aspirational place, because really what we're selling people when you sell is you're selling them a better version of themselves.
Yes.
Right? The best version of themselves that they can possibly be. My favorite example of this is actually Nike. They do, the Just Do It campaign.
Yep.
That is a brilliant campaign. It's short, it's concise, which is also very important in storytelling. It makes you the hero. You're going to go do it. It's not not Nike's going to do it for you, right?
Right.
You're going to go do it. Just go do it, because then you will be a phenomenal athlete, a phenomenal human, you'll have a phenomenal experience, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, and it's interesting too, because they're not only putting the focus on their customer or their client or their consumer, but they also then become this like top of mind thing of, yes, you're going to go do it, but guess what? When you're ready, we're going to be the ones to help you.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think story resonates so greatly that when you were asking about, people feeling or saying that people feel like they don't have stories or they don't have enough stories. I hear this all the time.
Yes.
I hear this all the time. And especially for anybody who has a brand that is based on them in some way, shape, or form, you have more stories than you ever possibly know.
Right?
You really do. You have this well of stories within you, and they don't need to be that important. People have this feeling that it has to be like, oh, the trauma that I endured, or no, they can be very little stories. How you went to Starbucks today can be turned into a story for your brand.
Yes.
How you showed up for your kids this morning and made them breakfast or whatever it is can be a story for your brand. It's about how you use it and how you position it to make it interesting. It does need to be interesting. It needs to be concise, simple, and interesting.
Sure.
But it doesn't need to be something scary or deep. And it does. And I will say, the other thing that I hear a lot from people is that it makes them feel very vulnerable, that there's a fear.
That's kind of scary, right?
Kind of scary to share yourself a little bit, right?
Yes.
But let me say this. When you share yourself, and again, do it in baby steps, right? Start small.
Yes.
When you do, that is when people truly connect with you.
Yes.
You are, again, your authentic, real, genuine self. When you share something, they connect with you because they say, oh, I'm like that. Oh, I am like that. Or maybe they'll say, oh, that's not me, but oh, that's my sister.
Yes. Well, we all want to relate to someone, right?
Absolutely. And the more that your customer, consumer, client can relate to you, the more apt they are to buy from you.
Absolutely. It's so funny. I work with so many students that say, well, I just don't know what to write, because I teach a lot of email marketing and web strategy, stuff like that. And emails, you got to share some stories. And they just say, I don't know what to write. And when I tell them about some of my emails that are the most opened, there are these stories that don't sound like a big deal, but they're a little ridiculous, a little funny, and people love them. And they know that I am someone that is like them. They can relate to me. And it works so well just to be real and put yourself out there.
Humor goes a long way. Let me say that too.
Yes.
we all tend to think of stories as dramatic and horrible and awful, the terrible things that have happened to us that we maybe need to talk about. But humor goes such a long way as well.
Yes.
Right? And because we all connect through that. There's a reason that the sitcom has lasted for however many years, right? We love those stories. We love to laugh. We love to connect through them. And, there are so many ways in which you can tap into your stories.
Yeah.
There are techniques and tools and really some really fun ways that you can do that.
And dare I say, like maybe an unpopular opinion, I feel like we need those now more than ever. We have this shallow, surface level social media quote connection that until you actually talk with someone and learn a little bit more about their story and their why and what's behind them, that really all it is words on a screen.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just an image. You know what I mean? Like and it's a curated image. And you can tell when you read a social post, you can tell, I think now more than ever, because the veil has been lifted in the social world, where you can tell whether something is real and honest or if it's totally faked and just, sort of on a very, like you said, surface level. And we really are craving intimate connection with other people. As wonderful as all of the technical advances are, which they are phenomenal. I mean, come on. The things that we can do now are phenomenal. We connect in ways that we could never connect before. However, it has also breeded a little bit of that shallow aspect. Let's put it that way. And we are yearning for deep, honest, real connection.
Yes.
And so consequently, the more you can allow yourself to be vulnerable, the more that you can allow yourself to open up and share bits of your story, bits of your day, bits of who you are, what you think, what you feel. People remember how you make them feel. Yes. When you offer that, it's gold. It's absolute gold.
It is. I'm over here like raising my hand like I'm in church. Like, yes.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Right? Preach. Oh, that's funny. I need a big hat. So maybe this is more of a challenge for me because I run 2 businesses with 2 different stories that are important parts of each brand. But it is something that I have to kind of keep track of. And I know how I keep track of these stories for myself, but is there a way that you kind of keep a list of some of the stories that are integral to your brand, or does it just come naturally to you?
It does come natural to me. I will say that because I've been a storyteller for 30 years, right?
Yes.
Now I don't really have to, that when you first start something, you have a very specific process that you try, and then you try another one and another until you find what works for you. Now I'm at the place where I just have an idea and then I roll, right?
Yes.
However, I have lots of ideas. Meditation is one of the most brilliant places to receive wisdom, to receive nuggets of creative genius. Also in the shower. That's one of my go-tos is the shower. Standing in the shower, there's something about that water. It opens something up in the pathway, and it's just like, woo. So I have Post-it notes and I write and I get an idea, and before I forget it, I write because I will.
Yes, I do too.
So I write it on a Post-it note and I just stick it on I have a bulletin board that I just stick the ideas on. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I will take them and what I call do an idea download and decide which ones are good and which ones are they were just a fleeting moment. Mm-hmm. And then I'll put them in a list. And then I created a Dropbox folder, an idea Dropbox folder, and they just go in there. Sometimes it's images, sometimes it is entire, paragraphs that I've written. Sometimes it's just a phrase or a word, and they go in there. And then I organize them based on that, going to, when I'm looking at what is the content that I want to put out, I look at, what's going to best serve my audience, my customer, Do
you interrupt your meditation to write them down?
I do it after. Generally speaking. Yeah.
Man, I always think I'll remember and I never do.
I've gotten better over the years of remember. And sometimes I think to myself, well, if I don't remember, it'll come back. Because it will. Yes. It'll come back in the way and in the time in which you need it. But sometimes it's so powerful. And I have to say, you're right. There have been a couple times where I open my eyes and I'm like, oh, I got to write this down. This is way too good.
Right. Just keep it close. I use Evernote. I just write them into Evernote real quick on my phone. So
that's good. Easy. I'm so old school. I have to write it down, like viscerally write it down, like old, like, I don't know.
They say there's a lot of benefits to that. So it's not necessarily a bad thing.
That's true. That's true. I also, and speaking of meditation, I also am a firm believer in flow writing, in sitting down and just write. If you really don't know what to write about, sit down, set a timer for 9 minutes and just start writing and writing. And write. And it doesn't need to be like, oh, well, what am I going to write about? I don't know what to write about, right? I don't know what to write about. I don't know what to write about. I don't know what to write about until it starts to flow. And what happens is stories just start coming out of you and you don't even realize that they're coming.
That's so true. Why 9 minutes? Just wondering.
I'll tell you why I say 9 minutes. Because when I say 10 minutes, people freak out.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Anything over 10 minutes, people are like, oh, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. I don't have time for 10 minutes. I don't have time for that. So I always say 9 just to see what their reaction is. Because you're like, well, wait, why 9 minutes? I'm like, because you won't give yourself 10. Anything over 10, you're out the door.
That's funny.
You can't give yourself 9, give yourself 5. If you can't give yourself 5, give yourself 2. If you can't give yourself 2 minutes, then what are you offering your business and what are you offering yourself as an evolving human being?
Right? Just start somewhere.
Start.
Definitely. I actually was just writing a blog post before we connected, and it's so funny. It was just 10 things that I'm going to stop apologizing for, like lessons for my 39th birthday. And I was just going to list them out very simply, very easy. And then the stories just come. They just come out, and the things that I've learned and the things that I wanted to share. So I so agree. Just sit down and let them come out, because everyone has those stories.
You have way more stories than you'll ever have time to write.
Isn't that crazy to think about? Like all the little things that you could possibly share that we can't even share them all.
It's just not possible because you said you're 39. You have 39 years worth of stories in there. So yeah, start small with sharing them. I know it can feel very vulnerable. I've said that a couple times on here, but I think it's very important that I emphasize that you don't start with the big, hairy, scary one, right? That needs to come over time. And I would also suggest that you don't share anything that you're not ready to share, that you haven't, especially anything of trauma that you haven't processed. Because I also will have students come and they have a really big, deep story that they want to tell, but they need to be ready to tell it, right? Use your therapist for your therapy.
Yes.
And while you can use writing for a therapeutic tool, don't use it publicly until you come to a place of processing. Absolutely.
I think that's really, really important. I call it the airplane rule. I won't share anything publicly that I wouldn't share with a stranger on the airplane.
Oh, I like it.
But unfortunately, I'm kind of an oversharer in general. So,
And then there's the grandma rule too.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Although
don't share anything that you wouldn't have told your grandmother.
That's true. Although I very much look forward to being a really inappropriate old lady. So that won't work for my grandkids, because I'm going to be the woman that hires a hot shirtless man for my baby pool in my backyard and invite my friends over.
But it will work for your grandkids because you will have passed this down and they won't feel afraid or ashamed to share.
That's true. That's so, yeah. Oh my gosh. That's so true. I didn't even think about that.
Because it's not about whether somebody else's grandma is going to be comfortable. It's, are you comfortable?
Yes. Oh, that's like another amen moment.
We're going to church. We're going to church.
Right. Oh my gosh. I love it. So for someone that runs a business and has a specific product or service that they sell, why does knowing themselves and their unique position become so vital to running a business, even if it seems like the business is totally separate from the person?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we were talking about how people buy from you.
Yes.
No matter what part of the business my business that I've done everything from, obviously, when I was fundraising millions of dollars for both the theater and for Broadway shows. The reason people invested with me was because they were investing with me. Yes, they believed in what the theater would do for the community. Yes, they believed and they wanted to have that Broadway experience and they liked the show idea, but at that point it was only an idea, right?
Yes.
It's about you. Even if your product isn't you, it's the connection that they're going to have to you through the product.
It is. And I feel like maybe that's been a shift from past generations, because I've been trying to explain that like to my dad. He's an electrician, and sharing a little bit about him on his website. He's like, why do I need to do that? I'm like, because these people are inviting you into their house. They need to know that you're not a creeper, that like all the
we're also at this place where we want full transparency.
Yes.
Right? We've taken the veil has been lifted, and now we want to see the real thing. We want to know who's behind the company. What are their values? Do their core values match my values?
Absolutely.
Right?
That's so important.
And I think it's going to be more and more and more and more and more and more that direction. So the quicker you can get on board with that and honestly share yourself, the more successful you're going to be.
That's so true. It's really important to really put yourself out there, which is the scariest part of all of this, right?
Yes, it is. It can certainly feel that way.
Once you get used to it, it's a little easier.
Yeah, that's why I say, practice.
Yes.
I suggest practicing first with a friend, right? Tell a friend your story.
Yes.
Then maybe, tell a stranger. Then maybe post it on the internet. Then maybe, bring it to a larger stage, and so on and so on.
Yes. I wonder how many people have taken that advice and shared things with friends, and their friends are like, why haven't you told me that before?
All the time. And what happens is it deepens your relationship.
Definitely.
Deepens your relationship with your friend. So why wouldn't the same experience happen with your customer, client, etc.?
Yes, that is brilliant. I absolutely love it. I'm curious about how spirituality has played into storytelling for your business, and what impact have you seen in your own life when you started to incorporate spirituality and mindfulness into these stories of marketing? I know you had mentioned meditation, but what have you seen in your own growth?
Yeah, I think they're intricately linked, right? And the more I grow and the more that I open, the more that I accept and walk into myself fully, both the dark and the light aspects of myself, the more growth I have seen in my business.
That's interesting because like you and I were talking before we started recording, that 2019 was kind of a growth year for me. And it was really hard to open myself because of that. I was just going through so much growth. And I have seen, even just in 2020, I mean, we're a month in right now? And the growth is huge in just a month from opening myself up and being more okay with being vulnerable a little more than I had been previously.
Yeah, it's direct. It's completely linked and related. And so, as I was saying, for me, spirituality really is about this opening of the self, of acceptance of the self, of loving and honoring the self. And the more that you do that, and the more you put yourself out into the world, your business, it can't but help your business grow and evolve and shift and change and go in unexpected ways. Part of it is too, I find that the more I know myself, I can be steady within and also ride the flow, right? Ride the wave, because business is a wave. You're going to have high highs and you're going to have low lows, but you must know who you are within that, no matter what.
Yes. And that has also helped, speaking personally, with the haters too, right?
Absolutely. Because you're going to get them.
Oh yeah. And the bigger you get, the more you'll have. And that was really hard for me because I used to internalize things so much. Like, why would they say that about me? And it's changed so much in the past year.
Yeah. And that a big part of that is knowing you and being okay.
Yes.
That people aren't going to like you. Not everyone's going to like you in the world. My mother told me that as a kid, and I didn't like it. Even then I didn't like it. I was like, no.
Right? I want everyone to like me.
But mom's wisdom was right. Not everyone is going to like what you're doing. Part of it is it's a reflection of them. It's something unhealed within them.
Yes.
Right?
That makes them uncomfortable.
Absolutely, because it's too much of a mirror to their own darkness or their own whatever, that they haven't yet, that they're not comfortable enough in their own skin. Because somebody who is fully comfortable in their skin, knows who they are, they're not going to bother with you. They're not going to be worried about what you're doing.
Right? And most people aren't thinking about us near as much as we think they are.
That is so true. Now I'm going to give you the amen. Your turn to be preaching.
It's so funny. My husband went to like a business conference for his work, and he's extremely introverted. And he texted me and said, I feel so uncomfortable. This is a networking event. I'm supposed to talk to people. I said, think of it this way. They're probably just as uncomfortable, and going to talk to them would be an act of kindness because they are not worried about you. So when you walk up and say hi, they're going to be grateful that you took them out of that uncomfortable feeling that they were having.
That's so good. That is so good. They were relieved.
Right?
They were relieved that somebody spoke to them.
Yes.
Yeah. That is so right on. That is so right on.
And so many of us think that people are just watching us and waiting for us to mess up. And usually they're not even worried about us.
I have to say, when I was younger, I was so worried when people would be looking at me or talking, and they would talk and they would look at me. And at the time I was like thinking, oh, they must think I'm gross or awful or untalented or terrible. And, now that I'm older, I'm pushing 50. Nobody's looking at me in the same way anymore. And I'm like, oh, I wish you were looking at me like you used to.
Right? That's funny.
Youth is wasted on the youth, as they say. The more, the wiser I get, the older I get. And because as you age, you do grow wiser, right? That's one of the great gifts of growing older, is that you care less. You care less. More and more and more. You let go a little more and accept and surrender to your own greatness. And it doesn't matter if somebody's talking about you, not talking about you, looking at you, not looking at you. You are enough.
Yes. It's so true. On the other side of my business, so I teach creatives, but I'm a boudoir photographer on the other side. And I've always said some of my favorite clients are 40 plus because they get to a point where they just accept themselves and love themselves as they are.
Absolutely. Okay. So this is a great story for you. Speaking of stories,
yes.
I teach an online class, a meditation class once a month for senior citizens in Michigan.
Okay. That's really random. How did you fall into that?
Well, I'm originally from Michigan.
And okay, that makes more sense.
it's my hometown, and the person who runs the center, I went to high school with. That's how I got there. Okay. That makes more sense now, right?
Yes. All right.
This is a very progressive community. When they come to the Living Center, they are each given an iPad, and they're taught how to use it. I think it's super cool that, here they are, they're 80s and 90s, and they're learning how to use an iPad.
That's amazing.
I come to teach meditation, and I had a beautiful student named Helen. Helen was 100 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And we meditate. And she comes to me afterwards. She has a walker. She brings her walker over, and she looks me in the eye, and she said, "That was amazing." She said, "That brought me peace." She said, "You are never too old to learn something new."
That's amazing. Can you imagine the stuff that she has seen, and then she's still open to learning and embracing new things? That's awesome.
I thought in that moment, yes, I always want to be like Helen. I always want to be open, receptive to learning something outside of my comfort zone every day until I'm 101, because she's now 101.
Wow, that is just awesome. Yeah. I can't wait to be the old lady. I'm going to be the inappropriate old lady, going to all the cooking classes, everything. It's going to be so fun. That's amazing. So when it comes to stories, do you have any suggestions for creative prompts that can help someone walk through starting to put together some of these stories that will work within their brand?
Yeah. So I put them into category. Things like my childhood. Speaking of childhood, when I talk about storytelling, for instance, when I was 4 years old, I was a born storyteller, my parents say. I used to get up onto a couch and do a presentation and recite all of the nursery rhymes. So even at 4 years old, that's what I did. Okay, there's like a little story, right? So that's just a teeny little story that relates to my brand or my teaching, whatever it is that I do from my childhood. So there's a well there of little teeny nuggets. Maybe something happened on your first birthday, maybe not your first, you wouldn't remember that. 15th birthday. You might remember your first birthday. What do I know? I shouldn't say that. You never know.
Or maybe your parents told you a story too.
Exactly. Or your parents have told you a story. So there's categories that I like to put them in. Childhood, middle, early adulthood, teenagers, college. There's, the history, your history. Look at your history. Then I also tell my students to look at what are some, particularly with your brand, what are the objections, right, that people have to purchasing, right? We talk about these all the time. What are their pain points? What are their objections? What stories in your life can relate to every single one of those pain points and every single one of those objections? So there's just more than a writing prompt of, today I went to the store, and which you can do as well. I think strategically, it's really great to use those objections and use those pain points as a starting point for your brand.
Absolutely. On the photography side, when I was talking earlier about some of the most opened emails that I've had, one of them was about losing a lot of weight fast and having saggy skin. And I called it my saggy baggy elephant skin. And that is a story that overcomes that objection of I don't look right. I don't look the way I want to look in photos and things like that. And it's so important to show people that you understand those objections and that you can take them to a place where they can get past that.
Yeah. And that's a perfect marriage of what you did. And that's why it resonated so much. It was taking this objection or this pain that your customer has and connecting it with something from your life. And when you do that, they can see themselves in it and they can overcome their problem with your help.
Yes, absolutely. Because you're the guide, right?
You're the guide. They are the hero. You are the guide, going back to that. And I like to call their pain or their problem their villain,
Yes. Something to
right?
overcome, someone to
Something
beat.
to overcome. The villain. They have to beat something, and that something
Hmm.
is that typically, most of the time, is their internal conflict, right? Their internal and external reasons why they can't buy your product.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, I love this. I'm not really good at telling stories, but I'm getting better at it. So it's so,
I don't know what you're talking about. It sounds
oh,
to me like you are.
well, it's funny because on the photography side, I've done it for so long. This is, oh gosh, 14 years as a photographer now. Whereas on the teaching side, I feel like my stories don't really matter. It's still kind of that vulnerable, like scary area. So jumping into that more on the teaching side is something that I am working on.
Yeah, I think it's also connected to how comfortable we feel. You just said I've done photography for 14 years,
Yes.
right? So there's this innate confidence in that. So the stories come more naturally because of the years of experience. You haven't been teaching probably for 14 years, right?
Not yet.
Not yet, but you will be, but not
Yes.
yet, right? So
Yes.
consequently, it's a confidence thing. That's the other aspect that I want to share here is to share your stories with confidence,
Yes.
right?
And like when I look at some of the stories that I do share on the teaching side, a lot of them aren't even about necessarily what I teach, but just believing in yourself and owning that confidence and knowing that you can do what you want to do.
100%. Again, aspirational storytelling, right? It's not even about, honestly, your product or you as much as it is how you're going to make them feel, right?
Yes.
Everyone wants to feel stronger, happier, healthier, more aligned, more in tune. And those are the stories that they're most going to connect with.
Definitely. Oh, I love this. It's
So it sounds to me like you're
important.
doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. You are an innate storyteller. I know that you are because you're a photographer and you're creative. All creatives are storytellers. So you are a natural storyteller.
That's true. You know what I've seen that's kind of interesting is I have two kids that are 10 years apart. My son is 15, my daughter is 5. And I have seen that with my daughter being born, I am starting to embrace more of those stories more and more. I don't know why. I don't know where that comes from, but starting to really embrace some of the stories that I was afraid to share before, because I want her to know her own power and I want her to move forward in her life and not be afraid to share.
That's beautiful.
So it's changed. We're all growing. We're all changing.
Well, we're all growing and we're all changing. And that's why, we talk to each other. That's why, we share. That is why we share our stories, is to help each other grow.
Yes.
That's what it's all about. Like, I learn from you, you learn from me. Hopefully somebody listening to this will learn something, right?
That's the hope.
And then they pass it on.
They do. And maybe we can pass on a legacy of, I don't know the word for brave, like as a whole, brevity, maybe. Brevity and courage and vulnerability beyond what our past generations have shared, so that we can continue opening more and more.
Amen.
Going to church.
Going to church today, y'all. We're going to church.
That's right. I got to get my preacher voice on. Oh my gosh. Well, stories are what we as humans remember more than most things, and something that can be so important and really vital in our businesses. And I really, really love this. Thank you so much for sharing your insight today, Nick. Where can listeners find you, learn more about you, and how you serve all of the amazing people that you touch?
Okay, so you can reach me on my website, which is Nickdemus, DEMOS.com, and then at the Nick Demus on Instagram.
Yep, that too. Amen.
All the Instagrams on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube as well. So at the Nick Demus, and it had to be the, by the way. I don't know if that's a story in itself, but it had to be.
I think it's perfect.
It had to be, because are you ready for this? Speaking of children, I went to get my website, Nick Demus, and this was like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I went to get my website, get the domain name. It's not like my name's that common. And it was taken. And
what?
so, yep. And so my web designer at the time said, let's call them. Let's find out. And because there was no website up, right? So I was like, okay, let's call them. So I called the guy on the phone. I get him on the phone and he says, oh yeah, I bought it for my unborn child.
Oh my gosh, that is crazy. That makes me feel like I need to go buy domains for my kids now, man.
And are you ready for this? 15 years later, there's still nothing there. So I don't know if he never had a kid. I don't know.
What?
But consequently, I had to become the.
You know what, though? I think it's perfect. It reminds me of, what is that guy? Tyler, the Creator. It's perfect.
Yeah. Perfect.
Oh, I love that. Do you have anything big coming up? I know you do your meditation stuff online. Do you have anything big coming up in the next few months?
I will be announcing my course, Real Stories That Sell. We'll be launching particularly for brands that want to infuse more storytelling into all of their media, be it, Facebook Lives and social media and blog posts and emails.
Yes.
Stories should be in everything, right? And
yes.
Not should. That sounds like a grade school teacher. You should be doing this.
Jim Fortin always tells me, you're shoulding all over yourself.
I love that. You're shoulding all over yourself. Well, I was shoulding all over your audience.
No worries. It's all good.
So anyway, that is coming shortly. So be on the lookout for that. And
that's amazing. I can't wait to see what you do with that. And for anyone listening, if you have listened to this and you're like, oh man, my brother, my sister, my mom, my cousin, or whoever in your life needs this information and you want to help, please share this episode. Nick and I would both be so grateful if you would. And if you have an extra minute or two, can you head on over to iTunes and leave a review? I know it takes a little bit of time, but the reviews mean so much to me and my team, and they give us feedback for what you love so that we can serve you even more in the future. Thank you so much for being here today, Nick.
Thank you for having me. This is so awesome. You're so great to talk with. So easy. Oh. Amen.
Amen, right? We're going to church. That's what the podcast should be called, right? We're going to church.
We're going to church. I'm totally down for that. That sounds awesome.
I think we should look at that domain before someone buys it for their unborn child. Oh, that was bad. I should not, Brooke. Anyway. Have an amazing rest of your day, and thank you so much for listening today. I can't wait to see what you do with the amazing gift that you have been given to change this world. We'll talk soon, and have a good day. Thank you so much for listening to Business Straight Up. I'm so glad that you could join us today. Check out the show notes for this and all of the episodes at businessstraightuppodcast.com. And I can't wait to talk with you again. Have a great day.